When it comes to the money you spend every day, we have you covered every morning. Making money makes sense. Weekdays on CBS Mornings.
CBS News, 60 Minutes, Sunday on CBS.
After nearly 4 decades of March Madness, this sports broadcasting legend is stepping away from his role in covering the NCAA basketball tournament. Jim Nantz on his fondest memories and what's next when we go person to person.
The truth matters. Lies have consequences. Today's settlement of $787,500,000 represents vindication and accountability.
He proposed huge cuts to important programs that millions of Americans count on. He threatened to become the first speaker to default on our national debt.
I think it's a good start. We got a lot of members who, want to make sure we put some more meat on the bones.
They would say that no, the thing we need to do is not raise the taxes, but do the spending cuts. Well, what do they mean? They mean cutting Social Security and Medicare benefits. I think there is a third and better way.
Someone even said, maybe you need another state prison.
I believe as a conservative, the job of government is in the main to stay out of the business of business. I don't think Ron DeSantis is a conservative based on his actions towards Disney.
Welcome to Red and Blue. I'm Caitlin Huey-Burns in Washington. Thank you for joining us. We are following 2 stories with huge political implications. A settlement reached in the lawsuit between Dominion Voting Systems and Fox News in Delaware, and the ongoing debt ceiling limit fight here in Washington. We're going to have more on that in a moment, but first we're going to begin here in Washington with House Speaker Kevin McCarthy trying to convince his own members to back his plan to avoid the nation defaulting on its debt in just a few short weeks. McCarthy spoke with his members during a closed-door meeting on Capitol Hill today. He pledged to pass a bill to raise the debt limit for 1 year, but only if coupled with a 1% cap on future federal spending. Multiple Republican lawmakers said the details of the plan are still being worked out. The Speaker plans to get the package passed in order to kickstart the debt limit negotiations with the White House. For more on this, we have Nicole Killian and Nancy Cordes joining us now. Nicole is CBS News congressional correspondent up on Capitol Hill, and Nancy is CBS chief White House correspondent over at the White House. Nicole, I want to start with you on Capitol Hill and play a little bit of sound from what we've been hearing from lawmakers as they've been learning about McCarthy's plan.
Members still have a lot of questions about work requirements, about how we're going to look at the Inflation Reduction Act, because that's going to destroy our economy. So I still have more questions than answers at this point.
I think it's a good start. We got a lot of members who, want to make sure we put some more meat on the bones, and we'll go from there.
I think there are a number of really critical details that we've still got to work out before making a final decision on a vote. But it's been a very productive discussion and a lot of good ideas.
So, Nicole, a pretty wide swath of the Republican Party in the House there. 2 of those members voted against McCarthy for Speaker. Donald's eventually supported him. But, how is this message being received among Republicans? Are you sensing any kind of inching closer towards some kind of deal, or are the margins just so slim for McCarthy?
Well, this is going to be a big test for the Speaker, probably on par with what we saw at the beginning of the year with him just winning the gavel. But the Speaker remains confident that he can ultimately get his conference on board with this bill. That was in part the nature of this morning's GOP conference meeting, where the Speaker did try to sell membership on this, that this is probably the best deal that they're going to get in order to jumpstart debt limit negotiations, even though the White House and Democrats say that they don't think there should be any preconditions to lifting the debt ceiling. But that being said, as you heard from members there are a number of questions in terms of, for instance, should they raise the debt limit by a dollar amount, or in a given time period, like lift it, just for the period of a year. Should the issue of work requirements, as you heard Nancy Mace mention there. Another thing that Republicans are talking about is whether or not to repeal the Inflation Reduction Act. Of course, that was a major package that was passed largely with Democratic support last year. Many conservative Republicans would like to repeal it altogether. That was the nature of a meeting that the Speaker had with some members earlier today after that GOP conference meeting. So there's still discussions happening behind closed doors. But again, ultimately, a GOP leadership is hopeful that they can move this forward.
And Nancy, obviously, this is a big hurdle for the House Republican Conference before it even gets over to the White House. But we already see Biden bashing this plan. Let's take a little bit of a listen to what he had to say today.
He proposed huge cuts to important programs that millions of Americans count on, millions of middle-class, suburban, as well as inner-city folks. He threatened to become the first speaker to default on our national debt, which took over 230 years to accumulate. He threatened to be the first one to default on the debt, which would throw us in a gigantic recession and beyond, unless he gets what he wants in the budget.
So, Nancy, the White House has maintained this whole time that they are not negotiating over the debt ceiling. It doesn't seem like they're any closer to budging from that. Do you see them making any sort of plans, or is this really just waiting to see what the House does?
Yeah, no plans at the moment, Caitlin. They are watching the disarray in the House and waiting to see if Republicans themselves are able to coalesce around anything. As Nicole pointed out, Republicans have such a narrow majority in the House. They would need to keep their whole party together. And if there's one issue that tends to divide Republicans, it's spending cuts, because there are going to be a number of Freedom Caucus members, MAGA Republicans, who are going to want much larger spending cuts than Kevin McCarthy is ready to put on the table right now. And beyond that, even if Republicans were able to coalesce around some kind of spending cut bill in the House and push it through, you've got the Senate Democrats who control that body who are simply not going to take it up. And so it's hard to look at how all of this is shaping up and to not see disaster looming and to not see brinksmanship and to not see sort of a difficult impasse between the president and the House Speaker.
Nancy, and I know obviously you covered the White House, but you covered Capitol Hill extensively. I was just taking a look at our polling yesterday that shows that Americans don't want to default on the debt. I'm curious kind of how the Biden administration, how Democrats are kind of thinking about that when it comes to the inevitable blame game.
Well, the way it's worked out in the past is that the party that has appeared to be holding out, particularly holding out for something unreasonable or irrational, that tends to be the party that gets blamed if there is a default on the debt or the threat of a default on the debt, because we have never actually defaulted on our debt, or a downgrading of U.S. credit, or even a halt in government spending that leads to, say, a government shutdown. Typically, the party that's holding out and digging in is the party that gets blamed. And of course, you always see both parties in the run-up to these standoffs trying to pre-blame the other side, trying to say that they're the ones that are being intransigent. But what the White House is banking on right now, as they sort of sit back and watch this all play out, they believe that it's Republicans who will get blamed. Although certainly, as we know for time immemorial, if there is a bad economy, it is often the person in the White House who gets blamed. And if we see any of the economic effects that have been described by economists of a default on the debt, then that could be treacherous territory for the White House as well as congressional Republicans.
And as you both mentioned, the clock is ticking. Nicole Killian and Nancy Cordes on both ends of Pennsylvania Avenue for us tonight. Thank you so much. And more breaking news. Fox News and Dominion Voting Systems reached a settlement agreement Tuesday afternoon. Delaware Superior Judge Eric Davis informed the jurors that the parties have resolved their case. And then he excused them. So joining us now from Wilmington is CBS News congressional correspondent Scott McFarland, who has been covering this case. So, Scott, an early earlier conclusion than some of us expected. What do we know about this settlement so far?
A landmark, potentially historic trial totally averted. So too is a possible spectacle for Fox News of its biggest stars and its boss, Rupert Murdoch, testifying before an international press corps on an enormous platform. The settlement is for nearly half of what Dominion was seeking. They sued for $1.6 billion. They have settled for $787.5 million. In a statement just after leaving the courthouse, the Dominion lawyers say truth matters, truth does not know red and blue, and that lies have consequences. Fox declined the opportunity to send its attorneys before our cameras, but issued a written statement saying, after the case settled, settlement reflects Fox News' continued commitment to journalistic standards, continued commitment to the highest journalistic standards. This was not a surprise as the day went along, Caitlin. This judge began the day completing jury selection and being diligent, he says, about staying on track and staying on time and being punctual. Then when the 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time opening statements were set to begin, they were paused for more than 2 hours. It was clear something was up, and that something was a settlement averting this landmark trial.
Landmark trial indeed, with a speedy conclusion, it seems. Scott McFarland, thank you so much for your reporting in Delaware. And coming up, we have author and businessman Vivek Ramaswamy, who is making the war on wokeness the centerpiece of his Republican campaign for president. He'll join us next. You're streaming Red and Blue, reporting across the political divide.
Hey there, welcome to The Uplift.
I thought she was a groom, and I stepped back and I went, oh, you're the queen. She's going to be with me every instant that I'm alive.
I just wanted to see if you'd go to Disneyland with me today.
I look over at him and he's smiling.
I'm going to remember that the rest of my life.
They told us when he was going to be born, he was only going to live for 30 minutes. It's really a miracle that he's with us today.
The Uplift. Stream now on the free CBS News app.
Morning news matters because it sets the tone for your day, and it's a way of getting you started.
We're going to uplift you. We're going to send you out your way day to day. That first draft of history, it happens right here.
CBS Mornings.
An original documentary from CBS reports.
I always tell people that Twitter would not be Twitter without Black Twitter. It's just us being in fellowship with each other.
And it becomes a conversation you don't want to be left out of.
People really started to recognize the power of activism on Twitter.
Based on that one tweet, the hashtag #OscarSoWhite was trending around the world.
If anything has really powered Black Twitter, it's been humor.
If your food ain't right, oh, we're going to tell you about that too.
We tend to create change, create culture and cool.
That's how movements happen on Black Twitter and go beyond more than that.
Black Twitter, the Twitterverse that changed a generation. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
You ready?
A generation of kids opens up on CBS Reports.
I just want to be like a regular kid.
Their world, their struggles, their voices.
What if I was white?
A lot of people like to call names and make you feel ashamed for being proud of who you are.
Now streaming Gender.
I did not realize that you could change your gender.
Realizing how you feel.
You can be a boy, sometimes you feel like a girl, sometimes you feel like both.
Redefining who you are.
Identify as trans.
Gender fluid.
Non-binary and queer.
Is the idea of gender a thing of the past?
And to be yourself, always, no matter what anyone says, I love you.
Are the kids all right? Gender. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Stories that inform.
Or you can be really old at 60, and you can be really young at 85.
Inspire.
How do we unlock the power within ourselves to be who we want to be?
And brighten your day.
The best part of fame is making people feel good. Always send the people home happy.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
We go to stories because we can bring someone to that story. That human connection is incredibly important. The news doesn't have to be depressing.
What do you love about running? Energy! Energy!
It can be uplifting.
And welcome back to Red and Blue. Businessman turned presidential candidate Vivek Ramaswamy's campaign is full steam ahead. He just finished his 10-county bus tour in the first-in-the-nation primary state of New Hampshire. The 37-year-old has joined former President Trump in taking several shots at Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. And joining us now from Studio 57 in New York is Republican presidential candidate Vivek Ramaswamy. Thank you so much for being here. It's good to see you. We appreciate your time. I want to start kind of where you fit in this field. I mean, you are a supporter of former President Trump, but obviously you wouldn't be running if you thought he should be the nominee, right? So what exactly do you bring to the table that he doesn't?
Well, I've been very clear. I'm taking the America First agenda to the next level, further than Donald Trump did. I'll tell you what I told those people in New Hampshire, is that America First does not belong to one man. It does not belong to Donald Trump. It does not belong to me. It belongs to the people of this country, and it wasn't born in 2016. It was born in 1776. And so the point of my campaign is that, yes, to put America first, we need to rediscover what America is. And I'm running for president to set back into motion those basic ideals that our nation was founded on, from meritocracy to self-governance to free speech to the rule of law. That's what makes us American. And I think in that sense, I can take Trump's agenda further than Donald Trump did in many ways, but also unite the country doing it. And I care deeply about national unity. And relative to Donald Trump or anybody else in this field, I think I'm the best positioned candidate to actually unite this country and to do it as a member of my generation. I'm the first millennial candidate ever to run for U.S. president as a Republican, and I care about creating that national identity for the next generation of Americans. That's why I'm in this.
Are you suggesting that Donald Trump isn't able to do that then?
Well, look, I think that he had 4 years in office. If he was going to unite the country, or if Joe Biden, for that matter, was going to unite the country, that was his campaign promise, we wouldn't be as divided as we are today. And I think the way we get to national unity is not by showing up in the middle and saying that let's all compromise. I think the way we get to national unity is actually by embracing the radicalism of the American ideals themselves. From free speech to self-governance, those are radical ideas. But that's what makes America itself. And I think that's what I'm going to revive and going further, ending race-based affirmative action, in abandoning this climate cult that shackles the U.S. while leaving China untouched, shutting down government agencies that should not exist. Trump didn't do these things. I'm taking that agenda further, but I'm also confident that I can do it in a way that unites Americans rather than leaving us divided.
So speaking of everything that you just mentioned, you mentioned all of that in your book, Woke Inc., where you talk about a lot of these themes. When you look at someone like Ron DeSantis in Florida, I mean, you have been obviously very critical of him. You've called him a career politician, and you said he's deeply insecure. But isn't he implementing a lot of these principles that you have been advocating for?
To a limited extent, but I think that the problem is what we really need in the White House is a leader, not a follower. And when you're off by half, you get things wrong. I mean, just look at the way that Disney has managed to outsmart Ron DeSantis, because when you're going through the motions and you're doing it for the reason of getting a nice little bump on Twitter or a nice cycle of media, you're not actually solving the problem that you set out to solve. I think wokeness is a symptom. Look, I think we're in the middle of a national identity crisis where people are hungry for a cause, hungry for purpose and meaning and identity, when patriotism and hard work and family and, most importantly, faith in our country has disappeared. We need to go upstream and fill that vacuum of purpose with the vision of American national identity, not short-term political stunts that leave you outsmarted at the end by some of the very companies that you claim to be railing against, from Disney to BlackRock. They actually get the better of Ron DeSantis at the end of the day. But it's sort of this deal with the devil where if all you're in it for is a short-term bump in media, then everybody gets what they want except the American people who are left holding the bag. And look, I do think he's been a good governor in a lot of ways. But I think that we need a lot of foot soldiers in this. But in the U.S. presidency, we need an outsider, someone who has courage of his own convictions. That's what I'm bringing to the table.
But in terms of the policy, going after Disney the way he did, you agree with that approach?
I actually I disagree with that approach. I think the right approach is to go to the root cause of the problem, which in this case is the ESG cancer that causes the shareholders of Disney to create a culture where CEOs of Disney and so many other companies bend the knee to this orthodoxy. I don't think using the bully pulpit and embarrassing them in front of the media is an effective approach. I don't think it's good from anyone's angle. It's not even good from the angle of Disney then coming back to get the better of him in the end.
What about from a conservative perspective? Because some Republicans have taken issue with the way in which he has gone after a corporation.
So, look, again, I disagree with the use of the bully pulpit and press cycles to just browbeat a company. I think you got to go to the root cause and actually solve the problem. The root cause here is that everyday Americans' investment dollars in the market are being weaponized by large financial institutions to force American companies to adopt these toxic race and gender ideologies and climate agendas. So I think the more effective thing to do, as I've been doing in the private sector, as I've been doing as well in laying out my platform, is to go after that problem, the use of private sector actors, the financial institutions through the back door to do what government couldn't do through the front door. That's what it means to solve that problem, not to use a bully pulpit, perform political stunts that are, in the end, ineffective because Disney got the better of them anyway in actually even changing the way that its governance was applied.
So let's talk about your path. You are a declared candidate. What states, what early states do you think you can actually win? And are you prepared to entirely self-finance your own campaign?
So this is going to be a grassroots movement lifting this up. I have put an 8-figure sum already into the campaign, and we will stop at nothing. But we've also had 20,000 unique donors in less than 2 months. That tells you a little something where I wasn't the guy who rang a tin can going around asking donors for permission to run. I think that's part of the problem in politics, in the Republican Party included. I think it's one of the main problems with professional politicians in the Republican Party. That being said, based on what I saw in New Hampshire, I think we have a very good shot at winning New Hampshire, certainly placing very well in the top 1 or 2 in New Hampshire and in the other early states. And I think that combined with the debate stage is really going to give this campaign momentum. I think that, we're climbing Mount Everest. The debate stage is base camp. I expect things are going to change dramatically after that first debate in August. We started at 0.0%. We're already at 3% nationally, even with very low name ID for me. So I think we're well on our way. We're right about where Donald Trump was when he came down that escalator in June of 2015, except this time around, I'm the outsider, and I expect us to go the distance, especially through Iowa and New Hampshire.
In order to get on that debate stage, the RNC has wanted a commitment from Republicans that they would support the eventual nominee. If Donald Trump is the nominee, will you support him?
Look, if that's the commitment to get on the debate stage, I expect all of the candidates to make that commitment. I think the debate stage is critical, so I'll do what's required in our party to be able to get on that debate stage.
You would support Donald Trump if he's the nominee?
I expect to be the nominee, so that's the party. That's the person who I'm supporting. In a world where every candidate has made their commitments clear as a precondition to entering that debate stage, I'll evaluate making that commitment.
All right, Vivek Ramaswamy, thank you so much for your time. We will continue to follow your campaign, especially, as you say, hoping for a top finish in that state of New Hampshire. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is in Washington, trying to rally support from fellow Republicans. We'll talk about the significance of that event and what's behind his continuing battle with Disney. You're streaming Red and Blue.
An original documentary from CBS reports. Controversial Congressman George Santos.
Why won't you answer our questions?
How did he manage to get elected?
Thank you very much, and God bless you, and God bless the USA.
George Santos' campaign was a campaign of deceit, lies, fabrication.
And who is he, really?
I knew him as Anthony DeVolder from Queens.
Really, who he is, he's a fraud.
I compare him to the Tinder swindler.
From people who know him, the truth, the facts, the lies.
He would say that he was worth $100 million.
It's an incredibly cynical episode in American politics, beyond satire.
Had you ever seen anything like this?
No, and I hope I never see it again.
Campaign of Deceit, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
She dazzled on the court and off the court as a businesswoman.
Thank you for joining us on Person to Person. Tennis superstar and entrepreneur Serena Williams.
an original CBS Reports documentary.
I asked my students, what are we going to do about racism in the United States?
The backlash over teaching about racism in American schools.
I don't think it has any place in the classroom.
We can either pretend and say, no, we're not racist and we're all great people, or we can actually start to do the really, really hard work of addressing it.
How did you lose your job? I made the statement that white privilege is a fact.
Is it helping diversity and inclusion?
When you bring in different people's stories and experience, it enriches education.
If you don't talk about something, it doesn't go away.
Or driving us further apart?
What schools are doing to our children in the name of anti-racism is in fact teaching them racism.
The intention is to put us in this war against each other.
An original CBS Reports documentary, streaming now. An original CBS Reports documentary.
I was entitled to equal pay for equal work under the law.
Does the Supreme Court's power need to be checked?
9 Supreme Court justices, 5 of them said no, she's not entitled. That's not right.
Calls to fix the court tend to go along with the politics of the moment.
Republican-appointed justices have all tended to go in one direction, with the Democratic-appointed justices tending to go in another.
Even though it's only 9 justices, it takes 5 of them to make the law of the land.
Does it have political impact? True. Political intent? Probably not true.
If the American people don't trust the judgment of their court, that's a real problem for our democracy.
An original CBS Reports documentary, streaming now.
On our places, bright shiny faces.
When you wake up in the morning, we want to be your go-to team.
I don't go to work in the morning. I go for coffee with my 2 good friends, and we talk about the world.
And welcome back to Red and Blue. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is here in Washington. He's hosting a closed-door meet and greet and a policy discussion with a number of fellow Republican lawmakers, or his old colleagues, in attendance. CBS News political reporter Aaron Navarro joins us now. He is in Washington, just outside where that event is being held. I see some security behind you, Aaron, and possibly some protests. So DeSantis already making waves on his return back to his old turf. Who's attending this event, and what does it say about what DeSantis is trying to do in terms of gaining support in the party?
Hi, Caitlin. Thanks for having me. Yeah, there are some protests here at what is billed as a meet and greet and policy discussion with Governor DeSantis and several members of the Congress, Republican members that he has invited. I've already seen some folks from Iowa, Randy Feenstra, attending this, as well as a congressman that has backed him, Thomas Massie. Now, the backdrop of all of this is that there are several Florida Congress members that have backed Trump over DeSantis for 2024. And DeSantis is not declared yet, but you've had at least 6 folks in his own home state backing Trump instead of him. Laurel Lee, the former Secretary of State under him, did back DeSantis, but this all comes as some congressional Republicans are showing that they are leaning towards Trump over DeSantis. Now, in terms of this event, he's expected to talk about his, quote, Florida blueprint and how that applies to the country potentially. But what I've been told is this is just a chance for other House Republicans to see DeSantis and kind of size him up a little bit and get to know him more.
Yeah, I mean, Aaron, we just showed some of those in attendance and the endorsements that you mentioned, and Donald Trump obviously unrolling endorsements from Florida as a way to kind of stick it to DeSantis. DeSantis has been in the news a lot lately, obviously, but made some more news in Florida. He had a press conference, and he essentially said that he wants to maybe build a prison next to Disney World. This is part of his ongoing battle with the company. Can you just kind of walk us through what this battle is all about? Why is he doing this with Disney?
Right. Well, it begins with Disney's public opposition to the Parental Rights and Education Bill, which specifically prohibits education about sexual orientation and gender identity before the 3rd grade. Disney's CEO then publicly opposed it. DeSantis' legislature looked at tweaking some of Disney's special privileges and advantages from having essentially their own governance in the district. They eventually landed on replacing the board that oversees this district with all DeSantis appointees. But Disney, before this legislation was fully enacted, Disney transferred essentially got that board to transfer all of the power to Disney when it comes to development on those grounds. And really, it's DeSantis saying Disney has reopened this fight, and he's said that there's going to be legislation in Florida to potentially nullify this kind of last-minute agreement that Disney made. But he's also said, taxes, tolls on the roads are a possibility. And as you mentioned, looking at the land adjacent to Disney, he said it could be used for a state park. Some people say it could be used for an amusement park. And he said one person suggested to him that it should be used as a private prison. So it's a sign that this battle is really not going away between DeSantis and the corporation.
Yeah, and it's kind of creating a wedge between himself and some others in the Republican Party. You have had Mike Pence be very critical of those moves. Also, Chris Christie today at an event this morning hosted by Semaphor's editor-at-large, Steve Clemens. Let's take a listen to what he had to say about DeSantis' moves.
And I believe as a conservative, the job of government is in the main to stay out of the business of business. Like, I don't think we should be heavily regulating business. I don't think we should be telling business what to do, what to say, how to think. And I believe that's what conservatives have believed for as long as I've been alive. I don't think Ron DeSantis is a conservative based on his actions towards Disney.
Just quickly, Aaron, what does this tell you?
Well, it tells me that there are more Republicans squeamish about this conflict between DeSantis and Disney. Larry Hogan, the former governor of Maryland, former Vice President Mike Pence, and even former President Trump this morning said that DeSantis has botched this battle, and it shows that they are willing to criticize what could potentially be Trump's biggest primary challenger.
All right, we will stay tuned. Aaron Navarro, I know you've been covering DeSantis on his book tour and back here in Washington. Thank you for joining us and for speaking over all of that crowd behind you. Great work there. And that does it for us today. You can stream Red and Blue Monday through Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern. You're streaming CBS News.
In today's Money Watch, business analyst Jill Schlesinger is here to help.
How do you even begin to make the best use of your money?
If you've got a match from your employer, don't give away that money.
Dollar Jill, y'all.
CBS Mornings, starting at 7.
An original documentary from CBS.